Um, who are we? We're actually this group of people that is made up of engineers, product managers, designers, product ops. This year we kind of started the year at around 30 people, and now we are at 110. I remember walking into this office on in March and thinking like, okay, we have so much space. Like, what are we gonna do with all the space? And right now, like, we have not enough tables for people sitting inside there. And I think this is just a fact of there being so many problems that we want to solve, and there's so many problems and opportunities that we can go tackle, and that's why we have grown incredibly over the last year. What is OGP about? And I think if you sum it up, like what OGP is about is actually a hypothesis about like if we build an organization that operated like a modern tech company, but then like we work on public sector problems. The idea here is about like modern tech companies is not just about like using technology to do stuff. It's also running it in a way that how modern tech company works, like being outcome driven and also being agile and being like design focused. So it's not just use technology, but it's also all the other stuff that makes like modern tech company great. So we started like around 2 years ago in November 2018, 2 or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. Like in November 2018. Since then, like we have created OGP and we have launched a whole bunch of products. Some of the products, and you probably have used, like just as you sign up for this particular talk today, you use like Form S3, which is like a government form builder to sign up for this talk. We also like done the vaccination system over the last like 2 years, right, to help you get vaccinated with like COVID. And we've like also launched CDC vouchers, which I think we'll probably be getting a new tranche like towards the end of the year, another like $100 to kind of spend in like in the neighborhoods and get like your money worth of like stuff. So we built a whole bunch of stuff, and all this stuff has happened in the last 2 years. So what we're going to be talking about today, right now that I've given a quick spiel about what OGP actually is, we're talking about how we are looking at disrupting healthcare. And I think we're looking at this in 3 different things that we're going to cover today. One is about how we're creating a product vertical, right? Like what's different about product vertical versus a product team. We're going to talk about transforming the way government works. Kenneth is going to cover that. And the pitch for his team is about how he can save 1,000 lives with just like simple like tech tools. Ting is going to talk about like co-creating better patient experience and helping users serve their users, like helping us serve their users better with like technology. Right. So first like disrupting like creating a product vertical. So on the last episode, right, like if you have been around, like if you're on Earth for like the last 2 years, like the main thing that's been going on is actually COVID. And through COVID, we actually like built multiple products, and I think the 3 main ones that we built is actually at COVID.gov.sg. I remember like we got this launch in 1 week just to help people understand in one single place what should you do actually when you have COVID, right? Before that, we have information on different sites, but then what we want to do is just have a one-stop shop for people to come here to like find out what to do if you have COVID, what should I be expecting, what should I be doing. We also built like the ART test system. If you have taken an ART test at a clinic for the last 2 years, you probably got an SMS, you got like a quick link to figure out like are you positive or negative, and more importantly, we were the people that built like the COVID vaccination system. We got to like appointments and we helped you kind of like get your booster jab and all the other jabs that you were required to get like vaccinated. So we thought to ourselves, right, like now that we are almost at the light at the end of the tunnel, we spent 2 years building everything COVID related. What's next for us? And we came out of this tunnel and we realized that actually COVID-19 is a very tiny portion of what we can actually do in healthcare. Healthcare, all this other stuff that we want to do, we have like queue management, we have emergency departments, we have appointments, we have telemedicine, and a whole other bunch of like vaccinations. And we thought to ourselves like the grand vision is that it's this year 2024. I wake up with chest pains. Within 2 minutes, I whip out my phone and like I kind of go find a health appointment system clinic, and then I get telemedicine consult. Realize that actually not that serious, right? And I take an ECG test on my Apple Watch and have this like result sent to the doctor. And then the doctor reassures you that like it's not life-threatening, but you should probably come down for like further exam. So you pull up Q, which is the product that you're thinking about, and then you get Q number, and then you go down to the clinic 5 minutes before your appointment, go see the doctor, and then after that, like doctor says like actually you're fine, like but then by the way, get a flu jab because you're going overseas, because protected. You leave the clinic without paying because like now we have like a product that's called MediPay that helps you get like payment done by the end of it. And then you also like go to the medication refill app and get the medication sent to you whenever you're ready. And then at the end of it, we thought to ourselves, hey, why was like GP experience not that great in like 2022, right? What changed? So the question then now is like, now that this vision, how do we actually get there? I think the very first thing we need is actually a team of people, right? Like can't do this alone. And this like what OGP teams usually look like. They are centered actually around products, right? We have like product managers, designers, engineers, and product operations. But this worked well for like generic products like PharmSG that is not in a very complex space like healthcare. And it's complex in the sense that like there isn't many stakeholders and there isn't like many like policies. And to give you a sense of like how complicated this can get, this diagram here just shows you like all the different platforms and meetings and people that need to be involved in like a COVID-19 kind of response. If you ask me today, I will probably not be able to tell you what each of those like 3-letter acronyms like stand for. And this just like entirely blew my mind as an engineer. And we thought, okay, like now that we're tackling healthcare problems, we need to get like an expert at this. Like we need to get a policy officer and fit him to the tech team. And before I go into like talking about how we want to kind of like have policy officers join the team, like maybe the quick intro about how policy usually works in kind of like government products. So we have policy officer like Pravin. He usually sits all the way like at the top, like in like the ministry and writing policy. So it's going to say like, okay, we need to increase like pneumococcal vaccination rate. And then next, you're going to write a paper, and then the paper is going to get approved, and it's going to be like written and formatted really well, right? And then what happens next is that it's going to be sent to like procurement like planning group. Like they're going to take this paper and say, hey, actually I need to go like figure out how to write a tender, and then how to like find the right vendor to actually like get the system like built. And now that the tender is kind of like awarded, then it goes to like the project management people. Right, project management people is going to take this tender and say, okay, all these requirements, I need to make sure that like this is delivered by the end of like this X number of months, and then that'll be like my main KPI. And then all the way at the bottom is actually like people like myself that's actually writing the code. And then I'll be like thinking, what was Pravin thinking when he was like trying to kind of like build the system? But I guess I don't know. Like I'm just gonna write code because I'm just a code monkey. And as you can see, right, this is a big problem, right? Because when I'm actually the person that's implementing this, I get a lot of signals from the ground about like what's actually happening. Maybe I realize that, okay, if they price, like I realized from data that if clinics price like their vaccination lesser than $20, that's actually a much higher take-up rate. But because there's so many chains of layers of stuff, like this information never ever gets to Pravin. And Pravin is going to be stuck there wondering like, okay, is the policy working? Like, what's happening with this policy? Like, what can I do? And over time, he's going to get like really frustrated. Then he's going to bring in like the big A, right, which is audit. And then like audit is going to come in and say, okay, make sure everyone's processes are working, because like the policy is not working. But actually, it's not about like the how great the process was, how great like was everyone following all the rules, but it's actually about just the lossiness of like the signals that's being sent back up to someone like Pravin that's writing the policy. So what we wanted to do with like bringing policy into the tech team basically is to shift from policy as product to policy as input, right? Like when policy as a product, this is basically we're treating policy as something to be implemented, right? Someone wrote a nice paper, and this is something that like the operations people, the tech people has to go then like implement this. Versus like policy as an input, we are looking at policy as same level as like engineering, design, product ops. These are all different like factors that we go into building the product, rather than just being like policy as the imperial edict that we kind of have to make sure that we write and like implement really well. So in our team, product manager, like someone like Kenneth, figure out like what problem should we solve, and designers decide how should we design the product, what should the product look like. Engineers then go figure out like how should we build the product, and product operations figure out like how do we empower users, and then now we have a new function, right, which is policy. And policy's like main job is actually to figure out how to get us access to like the really meaty problems, right? Policy officers knows like which meeting platforms to go to, they know which like kind of like people to talk to get like certain clearance for certain access to problems. I think this has worked really well for us. And just quoting one of my engineers that has worked with Pravin before, he mentioned that working with Pravin is a religious experience because like one makes a wish to like put TVs in the hospital, and by like divine providence, like one somehow begins to receive emails from like emergency department, like head of departments agreeing to make it happen. This is exactly the power of like having policy as part of your product team. If we didn't have a policy officer within our product team, like we'd be left wondering like which door should we like knock, like who should we talk to. But then now that we have Pravin, like things magically happen to us and we like get things going. So now that we've gathered a whole bunch of people, right, and we want to kind of like go build a product vertical. The question for us then is like, okay, how should we kind of like structure the product vertical, right? Is this same as like a normal team? Like, what should we do differently? There's sort of like 3 principles that we sort of landed on. Principle 1 is that we want to align along problems, not product. And then this to kind of like avoid the situation where there are people thinking, oh, this is actually not my product size scope. Like this is not your product scope either. Like, and then now there's this gap, right? When you align people along problems, you don't limit them in terms of like solution space that you can go about like creating solutions for. And the other principle is like we want to explore new problem spaces continuously with like small squads of people that build quick prototypes, right? And in small squad, we're talking about like just 3 people, right? Product manager, designer, and then engineer. One example of this is that recently, if you've seen the news, emergency department, like wait times were insane for quite a period of time. These 3 people, like which is like sort of our triad to explore new problem spaces, they built like really quick prototypes, and then they put this in front of like emergency departments to ask them, hey, is this what you want? And the main difference for this is that we're not going to them now with say like prototypes like slideware. Like we have actual prototypes that can actually like play with and tell you exactly, is this what I want, or like what can be better? And it makes them feel so much that the solution is like that much closer, rather than like, okay, we need to go down this long like procurement process to get something done. So again, quoting another like PM, the room like that he went into to present like the prototype, they really perked up when like rather than telling them, hey, give us this amount of money, we'll do this, like we just straight away send them an SMS and say, hey, this is actually what the experience looks like, explore this on your phone. This really changed the dynamics in terms of like how people approach problems and how can they actually think about like what's actually possible. So the last principle that we have talked about is that we want to build enablement teams to create tools that like increase velocity. When you have product teams will kind of just always focus on building the next feature, the next feature, and next feature, right? Because that's what product teams should be doing. But as the nature of this, sometimes you forget that like you can actually increase your velocity when you invest money and time to build better tools. And which is what we want to do. We want to actually have part of our group, our part of our vertical, focus in terms of building better tools so that we can move a lot faster. Example of this then is, so we talked about this particular thing that we want to build, which is like starter kit. Every single time when we want to launch a new product, there's all this bunch of stuff that you have to do. You have to go like set up AWS account, you got to go like write some code, you got to like get out the boilerplate. The concept here is that what if we just made it one command, right, in your command line, and we say like create a new OGP app and then like give it a name, and 30 minutes later you have a live site that is like really up and going. So these are like things that we just left it to the product teams. Product teams will not have the time to do it because there's always a more like meaningful product feature that they can build to like deliver impact. Which is why we need to specifically carve out people and time to actually like look at some of this tooling to help us like move that much faster. So 1 year on from this exercise of like building this product vertical, we kind of landed here, right? We have problem aligned like teams in case management and deployments, and both of these are creating products such as like Cash360, which Ting will talk about, and Hush, which Kenneth will talk about. We also have like a small exploration team now, just going into different spaces with like hospitals and different medical like organizations to see like what can we do, right? Like we can like have some engineers for you to build very quick prototypes, like what kind of ideas can we validate. And we also have enablement team, right? Like people like Pravin, myself, as well as like Blake. We're looking here how can we like on a more macro level support the team, help them move faster so that they can actually build things a lot quicker. And then when we take a step back, actually, we realize that, okay, from this whole list of stuff, we only tackled 2 things. We've only tackled appointments and case management. And COVID was something that's far away. There's so much more opportunity for us. Which goes back to like the recent push that we've done for the tech layoffs, as well as people that are looking for opportunities in the public sector, which is the Tech for Public Good initiative. And we're hiring, right? Like we want to accelerate tech hiring in the government for the next 3 months because there are so many important problems that we can solve. There are over 700 roles that's available in the public sector, 50 roles in the OGP itself. And also, just quoting Hong, we have the best people working on things like shopping and entertainment, but like not on public good problem. Like that's a big problem, right? Like I remember having an intern that went on to one of the big tech companies, and I caught up with him recently, and I asked him like, what are you doing at like this big tech firm? And he told me that he just spent like kind of 1 week making sure that the sliding like menu was really like 60 frames per second on every single device. And I was like, okay, cool, right? But if you will join us, you could be like getting people vaccinated, saving people's lives, and doing so much more impactful stuff.
You put this a lot more politely than I did.
Yeah. Yeah, so the last call to action before I pass on time to Kenneth is that we have a lot more of these information sessions that is available, and if you want to kind of like find out more about what it is like working in government, not just in engineering, but also in design and in product, and even like, as corporate and public policy, sort of like the role that Pravin is in, like feel free to join us for this event. There's a QR code here, you can scan it, and then you can submit the form, and like we will send you information on how to kind of like join the sessions. Yeah, but I'll pass on the time to Kenneth to tell you how we intend to save 1,000 lives with like simple tech tools.
Okay, thanks everyone. My name is Kenneth, and I'm one of the PMs on the health tech team. So today, like rather than talking in abstract, I thought maybe we can give an example of how we try and OGP try and transform maybe by a little bit how the way the government works by using very simple tech tools, right? Like so a lot of times I think when people think about like how do I help government basically transform the way government work, you always think about like big ideas, big product, big systems. But what we're trying to do here really is that I think technology has moved so far ahead that actually even very simple tools can create an outsized impact. And this is just one of the examples that we're trying to share here today. So the question that I want to ask everyone here is, what do you think is the best way to save lives? Is it to work out, or is it eat healthily? It's a problem that we think about all the time, right? Health tech team, how do we save as many lives as possible? And honestly, we came to the conclusion that vaccines is really the easiest way for one to save lives. And the reason why it's very clear, if you look at the numbers, right? Pneumonia vaccines, right? Each year, 4,400 people in Singapore die from pneumonia. It's second biggest death, cause of death. Third one, now that COVID has reduced the number of pneumonia deaths, but still like accounts for 1 out of 5 deaths in Singapore. So unfortunately, 1 out of 5 of us in this room will die from pneumonia. And the irony is that actually it's highly preventable, right? Like a PCV13, one study showed that it could prevent up to 75% of pneumococcal pneumonia infections. Cervical cancer HPV vaccines, I think some of you might be familiar here. Like each year, 172 women in Singapore die from cervical cancer, 300 out of 309 women who are diagnosed. It's the second leading cause of death amongst women in the age of 30, and 99.7% of cervical cancer is caused by HPV, this virus. And it's highly preventable if you take the vaccine. And to look at the numbers is very clear. Like a study of 1.6 million women showed that if you take an HPV vaccine before the age of 17, there's an 88% reduction in chance for cervical cancer. 88% chance of reducing cancer. Like, have you heard of that? Like, I haven't until I started working on the health tech team. And you can imagine the impact, right? Now I sound like a salesperson. But the question is, if it's so important, what do you think the vaccination rate is? That's the natural second question, right? Shockingly, in Singapore, like the last time we looked at a 2020 survey by MOH, only 12 to 14% of adults are protected from flu and pneumonia in comparison to our other childhood vaccines, which are over 90%. So COVID and childhood vaccines, Singapore is top of the game, right? Like over 90% of every category. But when it comes to adult vaccines, once you leave the school, I recommend you take a vaccine, almost nobody will take it. What about HPV vaccine? Less than 20% of women in Singapore are vaccinated against HPV. We are one of the lowest amongst developed countries. So one study in 2019 put us at the last amongst all developed countries. And it's slowly changing, but we're trying to see how we can help that happen, right? When you think about it, state of play here today. If I want to recommend people to take a vaccine today, what do I do? Today, like what the government does, as it has done like for the last 10, 20 years, I want you to do something, I send you a letter. I send every household a letter and say, hey, this is very useful for you. Go and take it, scan a QR code, etc. Right? When you think about it, the process of sending a letter, those of you who are in the government, one vendor to design the letter, one vendor to translate the letter, one vendor to print the letter, one vendor to tag the letter, and one vendor to mail the letter. So 5 rings to rule them all, right? And for every vendor, this is what I have to do. I have to write a requirement, seek approval, put up a tender. It must be a fair tender, right? And then start building, and then I pay a lot of money. I do this 5 times, 25 times, just to send one letter to the whole country. But then what happens is that sometimes you realize, hey, actually maybe they're out of stock, like no vaccine. And do I still send a letter? Do I not? I already paid the vendor, what should I do? Right? This is the kind of conundrum that we face in today's Singapore, right? And there's a Chinese saying that by the time you're done, the flower will have wilted. And this, I think, is quite true. And after all of that work, right, what is the impact? The last time we did a campaign, we sent out about 60,000 letters. We put a QR code below, and only 3.5% of the people will scan the QR code to follow up on it. In other words, I sent 100 letters, only 3 people respond. And of the 3 people that scan the QR code, not everyone will make an appointment, only 12% will make an appointment. So after all of that work, I sent a letter to the entire country. Turns out, most people probably wouldn't do anything about it, right? And the impact on it is very low. And as a result, the rates have been low for a long, long time. So how does OGP come in? But before that, we look at the numbers, right? 3.5% increase in click-through rates, 22,000 elderly gets to the health appointment system landing page, 2,000 appointments, about 100 plus life saves. I think it's pretty good, and I think the effort is very admirable. But then OGP comes in, right? Like what if we ask ourselves, what if we use SMS campaigns as an alternative? not a revolutionary idea, right? Like, but if you think about it, it's very easy for us, right? We retrieve the patient contact information from the National Appointment System, seek MOH's approval to use it. We put it on go.gov. Some of you might know it's our link shortener application where basically you create unique links for everyone. And then you send it out via Postman, which is an app, a web application that we have to just send out SMS. It's not very complicated. Anyone who has used it knows that this is 10 minutes of work. And basically, with this, we can send every single individual in Singapore a tailored SMS to encourage you to do the vaccine that you ought to do. And I can basically basically tier it as much as when, like this week there are more vaccines, I send out 10,000. Next week I send out 5,000. And I can control it as and when I want. And with the QR code, I can observe the take-up rates down to the very minute. And this is how much granularity we have. And I just want to talk about it. I want to talk about like details. So we decided, this is so fun. We don't just send an SMS, we want to do experiments and basically figure out the effectiveness. And this is a key like OGP like culture, right? You don't just send SMS, you forget about it. Like everyone will ask you, hey, what's the impact of the work that you've done, right? So you have to measure it. So I decided to have a little bit of fun with it, right? And do SMS experiments. So what I did was basically I sent out 3 different SMS copies and I'll run through them one by one. And this is where it gets interactive. You guys can say what you think is the most effective one. First copy, psychological safety. Basically, I mirror what you get for COVID-19 vaccine invitations. So on the left is what you get for COVID-19 invitations. On the right is what you get for pneumococcal vaccine. So pneumococcal is our target. We basically make it look very similar so that you feel like, oh, there's like this safety, I've used this before, it works, I should use it again. So our first hypothesis is that this psychological familiarity will encourage take-up rates for vaccines. The second one, loss aversion. Basically, we want to convey to you the impact of not taking a vaccine. Every year, 1,000 people die. Take your vaccine now, scan this QR code. Any questions, look at this link. The idea is that fear and loss aversion is a much more powerful motivator to get people to take a vaccine that's not mandatory, right? The last one is just, like something that's easy, low cognitive load. Very short SMS as much as possible, just call to action straight away. Protect yourself, take the vaccine. Here, if you have any questions, click this button, right? Very simple experiment. Question here, right, is, which one do you think performs the best? And before you also think about it, letters are 3.5%. So how much do you think SMS would achieve? So I'll start now. Psychological. Oh, my bet is number B, obviously. I like to scare people. So 27.1% for the first copy. This is 9 times more than as the letter. Second copy, 23.6%. Surprisingly, loss aversion doesn't work. And the last one, no cognitive load. I guess it works about 10, right? So the lesson learned here for me is that actually, just be a proper boy. Don't try and scare people. But the conclusion is that copy A that mirrored the MOH's COVID-19 SMS invitations performed the best, and it's 9 times better than letter campaigns, and don't know how many times cheaper and faster, right? But what I thought was interesting was that the worst performing copy, which is the fear-mongering one, because it induced fear. So when you interview people, they actually say, "Wow, this looks like a scam SMS." So they tell me, "Quickly do it now. Like if you don't do it, this is what will happen." And that actually induces like this sense that things are very scary. It might be a scam. I better don't click it. So that was one interesting findings. But what I want to draw this back to is impact, right? 23.6% increase in vaccination rate just because I play around with the text, and I do the SMS campaign, leads to 153,000 people going on the website, leading to 18,000 more people taking the vaccines, and an average of 920 lives saved. Playing with a bunch of SMS, string together a different product, that's 900 lives. How many people do we take? 3 or 4 engineers. So every engineer saved about 300 lives, right? Think about it, like even if you be a doctor, I also cannot say that you can save 300 lives within a week, right? Doctors might challenge me on this, but give me a break. So the second experiment that we did a bunch of them, so I just showed 2 only, just for the sake of demonstration. Did time, right? It's the most rabak experiment that I tell the team. Because there's an experimental schedule, Monday to Sunday. Every day I send 7, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 batches, and 49 batches. But unfortunately, this is when I realized Postman doesn't offer a scheduled send option, which means for 7 days, I basically have to set 7 alarms every day. Wake up in the morning, so have to run to your laptop and then click send, and then you do it 8 times per week. But the question is, in your mind, what do you think is the best day of the week for SMS performance?
Monday.
Elderly above the age of 65, Monday. I'll say
Sunday.
You're right, Monday performs the best. For some reason, like basically the start of the week performs marginally better than other days of the week, right? So even these things do matter. But the second question here is, what is the best time of the day to send an SMS to elderly? 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 2 hours every batch.
Yeah.
8 a.m.
Yeah.
So someone was like, one of my colleagues was like, they actually kind of, honestly, elderly wake up at 4 a.m., so you should test 4 a.m. If you really want to be robust and treat this seriously, I'm like, wow, let's wait until the scheduled send option before I do it. But the answer is right, 8 a.m., perform the best. And not just by a little bit, you know, like just by sending it at the right time, you increase by 5%. This is hundreds of lives saved just by changing the time of the SMS. And I think most of us can imagine why lunchtime nobody want to read the SMSs. Early in the morning, nothing happens. And the Joker who told me to start testing at 4 a.m. Actually, the Joker has a point because it peaks out at 8 a.m. So technically, it might be even higher at 6 a.m. Right? Maybe I'll redo this test again when I have time. But I'm happy with the conclusion for now. And I still wake up every 8 a.m. to send out these SMSs. But the conclusion I want to make on one end is the results of the campaign. You guys talked about it, I won't run through it. But what I want to say is that just by optimizing the SMS copy in terms of time, date, and all of that, right, we can save 1,030 lives. And this is really the spirit of OGP, right? What we're trying to do here. Don't do like fanciful like backflips and everything. Just do what it takes to achieve the objective in the simplest, cheapest way possible, preferably in a team of 3. And that's what we are hoping to offer you guys here, right? Which is the opportunity to make an outsized impact and to feel empowered to try out whatever you want. Because I asked myself, like, maybe if I'm within a ministry and trying to do an experiment like that, I might be worried about, do I have to clear the SMS copy my bosses, get their approval, what if people complain? These are all valid concerns, but I don't think that they sometimes we lose the forest for the trees, and we don't end up making the impact that we could. Yeah. So that's all I have. If any questions, feel free to ask in the pigeonhole. But I want to like pass over the time to Jingyi to finish the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello. So I know some of you just came a bit later. So just to let you know, there's actually some drinks over there that you can just, help yourself, please. Yeah. Okay. This is supposed to be a very casual talk, but everybody's like looking very serious. Okay. So hello, I'm Jingyi. I'm a product designer here at OGP. So I've joined OGP slightly over a year, and then I'm working mainly in like the health tech space. So I worked on HAS earlier, Ken talked about it, and right now I'm going to talk about another project that I've been working on, which is called Care 360. Yeah. Okay, so Care 360 is basically OGP's first enterprise project. Just so you know, this product hasn't been launched yet, so it will only be launched March next year. Okay, so here's a quick breakdown of like how what I'll be sharing today. Okay, so let's talk about the project, right? In sample, right, we have one of the most successful healthcare systems in the world. While government works very hard, right, to make healthcare accessible or affordable, there will still be people that won't be able to pay for their medical bills. So we know how painful it is to actually fall sick, but many times it's not just about like the physical pain, but it's also about like the emotional and financial battles that they actually have to face. So this is even more so for people who are actually less well-to-do. So that's where Care 360 steps in to help those that are unable to help themselves. I don't know what's wrong with the sound, but okay. So in short, what is Care 360? Care 360 is actually a case management system for MSWs or medical social workers to track and plan psychosocial and or financial care for their patients. So a lot of people always ask me what's medical social workers, right? They are basically social workers who work in a hospital setting. And then you might be wondering, what do they do? So here are some of the roles that they actually cover. So firstly, they actually gatekeep government's money through like raising financial assistance for those that need help. They do counseling and also work with community partners for people who are discharged. Yeah. Okay. And then you might be asking, right, is there an existing system? So the short answer is actually yes. Not the best. It looks just like any other enterprise software. So now for some story time, right? But before I share about how we landed the project, I'll share why it was first built. So if you understand Singapore's healthcare system, you'll realize that actually there are 3 different clusters. So most people know MOH as MOH, but they don't know that there's actually different clusters, and they're all privately held with 27 institutions under them. So in the past, right, many of the institutions had different systems for the MSWs to manage their patients, which didn't really make sense in their practice. So therefore, right, any MSW or Care 360 was actually built to align their workflow and facilitate data sharing. So here's just kind of like a brief background. When it was first launched in 2019, right, after a couple of years of scoping and building, the expected outcome was basically not ideal. So later they realized actually it just makes more sense to build a new system rather than keep fixing the old one. So that's when OGP was brought in 2021 last year to build for the team. Okay, and then what's our approach, right? Of course, it's not just about fixing problems or delivering a better solution. It's actually about solving a need. Should I just not mute the mic?
Yeah.
It's a bit distracting, right? Okay. Never mind. Can you not hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so distracting. Shall I try this?
You can try.
Test. Can you hear me? Okay. So yeah. So I think to us it's not just about fixing problems or delivering a better version, but it's actually about solving a need. So to first understand, okay, let's talk about approach, right? So we're almost about a year into the project because we started December 2021, and right now I'll just share about our approach of how we tackled the problem. So actually here at OGP, right, we're actually given a lot of autonomy as to how we want to do our research, scope the project, and also execute it. So to first understand the problem, we actually did a lot of interviews and field studies where we'll head down to the hospitals and then shadow the MSWs as they consult their patient. So on the screen, right, you can see this random like corridor looking thing. So it was actually a photo I took because I was kicked out of the session because the patient wanted to share something private with the NSW. Okay, then after that, right, later on someone suggested, okay, let's include the engineers. So we saw this as an opportunity where the engineers can help build some empathy also. So instead of them just like facing their computers and code all day, right? Like what Kiwi mentioned earlier, no code monkeys here. But then the funny thing was that engineers being engineers, some of them actually didn't have formal clothes, so they actually had to buy formal clothes just for these sessions. Okay, no offense to any engineers here. Yeah. So, but I think all in all, this session was really very valuable because through these sessions, we realized how real the problem of poverty is in Singapore. So I'm sure like, no one wants to be poor, and sometimes people just don't have a choice. So for some of them, right, it's already like a struggle to get by daily, but when they fall sick, right, it's actually the worst thing that can happen to them. So I remember sitting in one of the sessions where it was a session with this man, and then this man actually has, his current wife has like 3 previous marriages. So in each of these marriages, right, he had different children. So when we were very puzzled because when we looked at the screen, right, the children had different surnames. So we were wondering what's happening, right? But then I think what was very, very sad was that, so he fell sick, right? And because none of his children was his, they were not willing to help him in terms of like his financial need. Yeah, so it's quite sad. And then after I think, yeah, so through these sessions, right, it helped us to give us a glimpse of what the MSWs have to face daily. Yeah, okay. And to them, I think it's not just about giving financial aid, but also how can they actually help this man cope. So this one thing that we do. We do a lot of interviews and field studies. We also carry out like, the other thing we also do is a lot of weekly meetings with our project leads. So on top of discussions, it's during these meetings where I actually validate my designs before production and actually test with more users. So we also have a separate WhatsApp chat. So I think to a lot of people, this sounds like quite a commitment, but I think it's very useful because it helps us to get answers very quickly. So we can text them any day and any time of the day, and then they can actually give us answers. So yeah, typical designer, I also carry out a lot of workshops where we get the NSWs together to ideate and co-create version 2 with us. So I must say that actually this has been very useful because we have received a very good feedback from here. Yeah. Then of course, we do a lot of usability tests each time after a sprint. So till date, we have actually carried out about like 53 UTs in a short span of 8 months, and I guess it's not normal. So honestly, even when I started counting, right, I was very surprised, but that's how much we actually engage our end user. Yeah, so by now you should be able to tell that we actually have a very iterative process of building, testing, then the whole thing just repeats, right? So I think one of the major learning points for me is that I don't have to always get things right at the first try. So like as our PM wisely tells us the importance of a two-way door rule, most of our decisions are actually reversible. So there's no point fretting over whether I made the best move or not. So actually here, I just want to give a shout out to my team. So yes, thank you to the team because thank you for being so supportive and letting me try. Thank you for your willingness to actually help me fix things if you realize that actually things can be done better. Yeah, so okay, not everybody on this photo is still on the project, right? Just so you're wondering why it's so big. But some have already moved on to other project, right? But just wanted to give credit where credit is due. So if you look at the picture, right, you also realize that there's actually a spot next to like Jasmine, right? Yeah, because it's waiting for you to join. Okay. Yeah, okay, jokes aside, right? I'll quickly move on to like execution. So here I'll actually share 3 key pain points that we've identified through speaking to our users, and I'll also share practically how what we've done to actually counter them. So one of the biggest complaints, right, we got about version 1 was system reliability and usability. So out of all the NSWs I've spoken to, and trust me, I've spoken to many of them, so this issue always comes up. So it's so bad, right, that one of the NSW was sharing how she actually had to asked like someone right who was actually crippled to come back to the office to sign just because the system crashed and the signature was not registered. Yeah, so I think that must have been a very big ask lah. So other complaints also revolve around like speed, frequent system maintenance, blah 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 like that you can see on screen, right? So I think for us, one thing that we did a lot was actually speed optimization. So what we do is that we'll go down to the different hospitals and constantly measure the speed of our platforms on their devices. So at the start, right, you can see it was about like 13 seconds just to load one page, but then subsequently, because we optimized, we managed to bring it down to about 3 seconds, which is comparable to like the internet speed lah. Yeah, still not the best, but you must at least via internet. Yeah. Okay, then the other feature that we introduced was also the idea of digital consent. So now, right, if anything happens, touch wood lah, the signing can actually be done asynchronously with the consultation itself. Yeah, so of course there are other considerations also to solve this whole big problem of system reliability and usability from different angles. So that's problem number one. The other pain point that MSW faced was this whole idea of data accessibility. So remember earlier I shared, right, that there are 3 clusters in the health tech space. So to be honest, right, when patients come in and they meet an MSW, right, they don't know that these institutions are privately held and they don't know that they are all under different clusters. So they just assume that, okay, this MOH. Then everything they also say this MOH. So since MOH is government, right, the government means that the government has all the data on them. So like the elderly always complain, why do you need me to give you so much information and whatnot? Because you should know you're the government, right? Then again, right, okay, you must understand when the patients come and meet an MSW, they actually have to come prepared with like a huge, large stack of documents, right, just to prove that they are poor. Yeah, so I think it's a very humiliating process for them, and sometimes it can be quite intrusive lah. So imagine you're just asking for help, but then you have to go through this long-ass process of like proving that, okay, I'm just not eligible, or like I cannot pay off my medical bills. Yeah, so while the MSW to have access to some of this information, right, I think the greatest frustration for them is that this information is not always accurate or they are whole. So they have to go to multiple systems just to dig up the information, or if not ask the patient directly. This is why the patient will feel this way lah. So one of the most crucial and important change we made is having the ability to pull from single source of truth rather than keeping the current data sources, which are usually data aggregators lah, so that information don't get updated so quickly. So we actually got information from like ICA, HDB, CPF, etc. Right? And as my PM like to say, if ICA is wrong, nobody is correct. So last but not least, right, I think the last pain point is that while there's a system for them, there's still a lot of manual and laborious work to do. So in the MSW's work, right, they like to tell us that the system is actually not serving them, but they feel a lot of times they are serving the system. So having to deal with the lousy system and process means that they actually have less time counseling the patient, which actually to them, right, is the most important part of their job. Yeah, so on our end, right, what we do is that we try to pre-fill and auto-populate as much as possible. So thank you, engineers. So for example, for expenditure, right, we give them the ability to actually auto-populate national averages so that they don't have to force like patients to give them one whole stack of documents just to prove that, this is how much I spend on food daily, how much I spend on transport, etc. So and also we also built them a brand new community page on our platform. So in the past, right, like remember that one of their job scope is to work with communities. So in the past, what they would do is that you would take out their phones and then start like Googling for like services near the patient's house. So what we did was that right now they can just go on the platform, key in the patient's postal code, and then you'll be able to find all the services that's available near them. Yeah, so that's all for the 3 key pain points, but of course there are more. So to quickly end off, right, with just impact, I'm just going to flash it out on the screen. So on top of what you see, right, we believe that actually a better system will definitely lead to a better MSW working experience, which will eventually lead to a better patient experience. So to summarize, right, we hope that through a user-centric approach, we can actually help to narrow in on what truly matters to our users. So I mean, it's very common in the industry, right, whereby, okay, there's a need, so you write a PRD, and then you hand it over to your vendor. Your vendor goes away and hide 1 year, start building away and whatnot, and when they're done, they just hand it back to you and like, okay, nah, here you go, this is like done, right? But I think essentially you have a product that's built off pure assumptions and also interpretations from like PRD itself. So how will you expect like the problem to be good, right, or the product to be good? So, but I think we believe that you can get so much out of like collective intelligence. So like if you ask me, do I really know more than like the MSWs about their job? I think probably not. That's why we tap on their knowledge of the practice and then combine it with our expertise in products. That's why I believe that collaborations and co-creation is so important. Okay, so cross fingers, I'll launch this next year and it'll be great. That's right. But I think that's the true test of whether our approach will actually work. So you can come back next year to find out more. So just gonna put this slide up lah. The project doesn't end after much for us, but we're also starting to think of stuff that we can do post MVPs, and are also in talks with some potential partners. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks all, thanks Tingy. So now we have our pigeonhole sharing. I think we're gonna go sans mic. I guess, I don't know if the mic is working.
Hello.
Okay, we'll keep it close to the mic. We have a few questions on Pigeonhole, but again, if you have questions, feel free to go to pigeonhole.at/OGP Health Tech. Feel free to vote, add more questions, etc. as they talk. But I'm happy to introduce Praveen. He was the one that Kiwi talked about, what was it, Angel?
Yeah,
or something?
the Angel.
Angel, yeah, this is our Angel, our policy Angel,
Oh.
Praveen, who will help moderate this talk.
Thank you.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So the health tech vertical kind of started in December 2020. We have a really uphill task for us, and there are lots of problems in healthcare, and we have great people to solve these problems, right? So again, if you're interested, let us know, right? Because we do need good people to help us out. Okay, why don't we start taking some of the questions? But before we go to the questions, I always love to ask people who are here and want to raise their hand and ask a question. Do you have any questions from the floor? Or we need to warm up a bit? That's fine. We'll let you warm up a bit. Okay, so maybe the first question that I can pass to Kiwi is, how are OGP and GovTech different from each other? Or is it just that you focus on different problems?
Yeah, so I think I probably answered this question at every single one of these events, so I'm just going to give the same answer. So I think both OGP and GovTech, we are focused on solving problems in the public sector. And I think if you ask me what's the main difference in terms of how we go about doing this, I think it's just the difference in approach of how we go find problems and how we solve them. I think at OGP, the main difference is that a lot of the solutions are actually bottoms up. Rather than trying to go out there and someone at the top in terms of policy, figure out what should we be building, and then telling the engineers go build it. We create an environment that we bring in, the best people that we can find, give them a space, give them autonomy, tell them, hey, go solve what do you think is the most important problems. So in fact, that's majority of how most of our products happen. Things like Formestry, Postman, Go, even the health appointment system that Kenneth worked on. How the health appointment system came about is Kenneth, gave the same pitch that he gave to you guys about saving lives, and he got a 1 hour slot at the team sync and just pitched to the entire team, say, hey, who wants to build this? The team formed organically, and then we went there and then we built it, and it just happened. So it wasn't a big approval process that we had to go through. We just kept MOH informed, we kept HPE informed. And I think there's been a difference, right? Rather than trying to have central authority to figure out problems to solve, we gather good people and we increase the surface area of how do we tackle problems. Yeah, so I think there's a main difference on OGP and GovTech, the way that we solve problems and how do you approach finding problems to solve. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we take the next question. Another one for Kiwi, I guess.
Right. So the other question again, what tech stack that OGP use and some of the challenges using this technology. So I think if you look at our tech stack, and you can actually go look at our tech stack, our products are actually open source. You can go to GitHub, OpenGov.sg, / whichever product you want to look at, and then you can actually find source code there. So that is the best answer to this. But generally, what tech stack do we use? We are mostly a TypeScript house. And TypeScript to us is just mostly for convenience. So because we can use it on backend and through Node.js, we can use it on the front end with React and all the other different stuff. I think that our main approach to technology here is sort of technology is not the ends on its own. We're looking at technology as a mean for us to go solve problems. And we will choose the most boring technology so that we can focus on solving problems. And in fact, 90% of the stuff that we want to solve in government, they do not require anything complex like AI, blockchain, or any of the other buzzwords that I can probably name off. So it just requires very boring technology and people going to understand the business domain and designing great product and just shipping it and making sure that's reliable. So we use TypeScript and that's pretty much our stack. And we deploy on AWS.
Actually, since we have you on mic, maybe we want to ask you, why health for you? Why is it passionate for you? There are many other sorts of problems in government to solve. What attracted you to health?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and then I thought about it, right? And I remember in my original interview with Hong for OGP, he asked me kind of what problem I solve, and I mentioned health tech. And why health tech is, I think, is one of the area that is potentially like the most impactful. Yes, there are a lot of other stuff we can do, but even something simple like getting people vaccinated, this is like literally changing someone's life potentially. And I think like just the amount of effort versus like the leverage they can get in terms of impact is just so much greater in healthcare. And also, on the other part of this is that as an engineer, I think like the healthcare space is immensely complicated and challenging, and like every engineer likes a good challenge and go figure out like how to get things done. Yeah.
Great.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just a question about,
Yeah.
you mentioned about AWS,
Yes.
and I see that you're pulling a lot of data from IC, which are all very secure
Yeah.
information.
Mm.
How do you overcome that security while going through a public cloud? Because
Right.
you have the speed to deploy one.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we do at OGP is like, we're an experimental unit and figure out like how can we do tech better and faster. And I think one thing that we realized over time is that where like you actually deploy doesn't necessarily like guarantees you like security or insecurity, right? It's often like a false dichotomy. Like if I deploy it in-house and like I put a lot of gates around it, like it's going to be a lot more secure than like I deploy on this like AWS public cloud, like commercial cloud that is like, oh, it's not owned by me. But the other way to kind of like think of this is also that would we be able to kind of like hire the same like degree or like level of talent as companies like AWS or GCP or Azure to really run their data like their infrastructure well and run them securely? I think the question is that in the tech industry, the competition for talent is so tight, like I don't think we can, which is why we want to look at commercial cloud. And how do we then like secure all this data? I think we're also taking a very different approach towards like security, right? So most of what government like to do, or like most public sector projects, or a lot of like traditional companies like to take the approach towards security is like security by audit. Basically, they give you a set of rules, like you go follow them, and then every year like auditors will come around and like, okay, show me the screenshots that say that you configured this correctly. Problem for this is like this is a snapshot in time. Like I can show you the screenshot, and then like 5 minutes later, like my intern can change it to something that's insecure and like it's no longer secure. Our approach to security then is like we want to get security by actively like pen testing ourselves. So what we do is that we go hire like external companies, right? That are like pen testing some of the biggest companies around the world. We'll get them to actively pen test our systems. We tell them, here's the source code, look at it, tell us what's wrong with this. Here's where our like UAT environment is. Pen test us, try to break into our systems, tell us what's wrong, right? And we do this before each major launch, so that it gives us like the high level of security, right? It's security by like actively testing your security rather than going down this checklist. Yeah. Cool.
Any other questions around cloud and security? By the way, government also uses commercial cloud as
Yeah.
well, so it's back on that. Okay, maybe next question. Ahis, thoughts? Yeah, why don't I take that question?
Yeah, so I'll give you the policy of first.
So, if you know or may not know, so ICE is a pretty large organization that supports public health. And every day they process millions upon millions of transactions, right? They have huge enterprise systems. They're in each of the public hospitals and the number 27 organizations and hospitals, clinics, labs that you see, that you have experienced, right? And I think they do what they do well. They do the security, the databasing, the transactions for public healthcare pretty well. But also that, I guess one of the spaces that they have not gone into more recently is in the primary care and the community care space. So I think this is where then we can come in, right, to support and look at how we can support ICAS expand what public healthcare can do in the primary care and the community care space. So we are working synergistically with them. They hold many of the major databases. A lot of the polls that we do for Care 360, for the health appointment system, come from them, and there is good rationale for why too. And yeah, so I think it's a good working relationship. Yeah, and they have a very, very challenging task. So I really don't envy IAS.
So maybe to also like add on, right? I think it is like would be incredibly naive for us to think like at OGP that we have like a monopoly in terms of like good ideas about what to build in healthcare. I think like the healthcare space is so immensely complicated that we need partners like IHIS to join us to like really solve the problem together. Like so, good example of this like in Care 360, we will not be able to build like a good Care 360 if like we don't have like support from our IHIS partners to push data to us and and kind of like make sure that we get all the different integrations run through. Like I think offhand on Catch 60 itself, we have like almost 12 integrations with 12 different systems. And if we don't have support from IEs, like we will not be able to kind of do this. So I don't think like it's useful to look at this as in any other way other than like being a good complementary like partners and then trying to like solve healthcare problems.
And there is enough healthcare problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe before we go into another question, maybe I ask Jingyi, right? In your experience as a designer and working on many projects, right? What has been different about working in healthcare and with patients and doctors and MSWs that you found?
I think it's just like the meaning behind it. Cause like I think I get to interact with them a lot, and then after that just hearing like their day-to-day, like how it sounds like and whatnot. So I think that's like the biggest difference. So before I joined OGP, I was actually in the finance sector. So I think a lot of times because the finance sector is so profit driven, and now it will be just like there's a project, then after that you have to just do it. And I think the previous experience, my experience wasn't that great was because essentially my PM at that point of time would just like come up with a PPT and then start drawing like boxes and ask me to replicate the exact same thing on Figma or like Sketchup previously. So I think that was like my previous experience, which was horrible. But I think in OGP, I think what's very different, not just like related to healthcare, but I think what we have different here is that we are given a lot of autonomy. So like in terms of like designing and scoping, we have a lot of say. So it's like, I work alongside my like stakeholders and I listen to them and whatnot, right? But I think it's just like a combination of like expertise. Yeah, so like as a designer, people always tell you don't listen to what your users tell you they need, but actually it's not true. I think you do need to like listen to them, especially for such a complicated project like Catch 60, which is kind of like an enterprise project, right? It's something that they use on a daily basis and whatnot. So I think the biggest difference is that listen to your users, and out of it like you'll get a lot of meaning. That's for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks. This is the one for I guess all of us. With 4 votes, how would you all describe your best and worst days working at OGP? Maybe we start with Kenneth.
I think for me, like my best day was also my worst days. I think worst days was when I came on board. The first thing I was asked to do was all the COVID systems. So I became like the COVID PM boy, like for like a year plus, and I'm still doing COVID work. Right? So I mean, Kai would know. Some of the people here would know. So it's not easy, right? Like turnaround times are very fast. Sometimes it's not creativity, you just need to get it out, right? Like people are like dying, people are falling sick, they don't know where to go for their hospitals, they don't know whether they're vaccinated or not, like they don't know where to go for their vaccines. So it's not easy. But the best day is also COVID. Like I remember when I first joined, we did this major launch for booster jabs for elderly. And after we did the jab, my grandma received an SMS and then she's like, invited for booster. She forwarded me the SMS, hey, can you help me book an appointment? And I'm like, wow. And I think that's the reason why I'm still very, very happy at OGP. Like every morning I wake up and I feel like I want to go to work. And I think actually there's, when you get this in life, there's nothing much you can complain about.
Deep meaning.
Yeah, so I guess I could like answer things. So I think very similar to Kenneth. I think best and worst days, like I've been here for around like 2.5 years. Like definitely had to do with like COVID. So I remember I just got married and then I came back to work. And then like on the day that I came back to work, Hong was telling us, hey, actually like Delta has spiked. Like we need to do something about it. And then like after that, I launched into like this 1 week of just like building COVID.gov.sg and putting this together, right? Like so 100% kudos to my wife for like putting up with this. So that like, but then I think the experience was like, okay, yeah, we need to get through this. Like it's really difficult. I was just trying to get contact. So like, yeah, that was not that great in terms of like the best of days. But I think like the best day also came at the end, right? Like when we actually got the site together, like we talked to like politicians, we talked to like users, and then we launched the site. I think like 10:30 at one like Friday night or something like that. And then we started having like people that is on like Reddit or people that's on Telegram chat actually like organically sharing the link and say, hey, like finally we have like a site that like we can like consolidates all the information about COVID, what to do with COVID, like, and people actually found it useful. And I thought like that was like one of the most times that I felt most impactful while I work at like OGP. And people are actually getting help on it. I remember I was like sitting on the bus and I was like casually like just looking at what the person in front of me was like surfing on her phone, and she was like, yeah, using COVID.gov.sg to like find out what to do if her son actually got COVID, and like she was able to kind of answer the question and like get on with her life. So yeah, that felt a lot impactful for me.
okay, I didn't work on COVID. So I think for me, like majority of like my work is done on like Care 360 and whatnot. So I think similar to the rest of them, best days and worst days are quite similar. So do we work very hard? Actually, I think we really do work very hard, and sometimes we have to like work overtime. Okay, not that you shouldn't join us, but but it's true. It's like you can't run away from like OT days lah here at OGP, especially like because Care 360 we have a very short timeline. Yeah, compared to a lot of like other enterprise systems. So sometimes we do need to like juggle quite a bit. Like when days where I have like user tests, it's also days where I have to like build my screens at the same time. So I would say that best and worst days will be like, okay, one night before, right, I'll be like chowing out my UT script, right, so that I can be prepared for the next day. Then the next day when I test out the users, and after the users are happy with it, then that will be my happy days. Yeah, so I think that's for me, like, I think it's just like over a short, like one day, I think it makes a huge impact on people's life just because of what I do.
Maybe I can share. Yeah, I've only been in OGP since July, so I don't think I've had worse days, but really my best days were when I was proven wrong. And I say this because actually when I joined, Kenneth was working on the health appointment system, and he didn't share much about the health appointment system, but basically it is the idea that can you normalize the booking of appointments that we used to do for COVID and do it for our general consultations with the 1,800 GPs in Singapore, right? And the idea was, oh, can we get maybe a few GPs on it? Let's try, let's see. And the idea of doing anything national in the GP sector is like just unheard of, right? There's just instant rejection. I don't want to do it as long as government tells me I have to do it, right? And I said, yeah lah, this one no go lah. I don't think GPs will take this up. Within a couple of weeks, it didn't just become a couple of GPs, it became 580 GPs, it became 622 GPs. And from my experience working in the private primary care space, this is unheard of, right? So I guess that was my best day when I was proven wrong. And I get that more often than I guess I expected, and that makes working here just that more wonderful.